Mr. Chairman, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here today. I've heard the expression when you leave Congress that you miss the circus but not the clowns. I'm glad you thought enough of us to come back here today and be with us to really have your valuable testimony and your insight here today. I want to touch on a couple subjects. We've heard a lot about 702 reauthorization today and how important that is, and I commend Chairman Turner and Ranking Member Himes for creating a bipartisan working group on 702 that I chair along and work with my colleagues on that, and would love to get your feedback on ideas, reforms, safeguards. I start with the premise that 85% of FISA works well. There's 15% that hasn't worked well. As part of our oversight obligation and responsibility, we need to fix that 15%. So we're looking at those reforms and safeguards to get at the abuses that we've seen at the FBI and other agencies to fix it and get it reauthorized. And so would love to get your feedback on that. And so feel free to reach out to the working group and myself. I want to switch to another topic that has come up that deals with the handling of classified information. We've had several public instances of mishandling of classified information. In some ways very embarrassing, really unacceptable in terms of the behavior by, at the time, Vice President Biden, of course, former President Trump, and Vice President Pence. And so we've looked at what can we do to fix the statute. So Congressman Quigley and I, in a bipartisan way, have introduced legislation to add civil penalties to the statute, which we currently don't have now. As a former federal prosecutor, figuring out what are more tools we can add to the statute, ultimately to deter the mishandling of classified documents, which is a problem. I'd love to get your feedback on ideas that you would have on either the classification process of documents, which we're looking at, but what more we can do to ensure that we don't have any more instances of mishandling there. And maybe I'll start with you, Peter, and go down the line here.
Thank you, Darin. First of all, I think there is a certain amount of overclassification. Having said that, you're not in a position yourself to be declassifying. I mean, so assuming that it's properly classified, to me, we have to make the sanctions more significant, not to be hunting down people. Obviously, there's going to be human error. And you have thousands and thousands of documents which could cross your desk. It's always possible you could take something with you, by mistake. But once that's pointed out, every effort to be made to cooperate completely, not to slow walk it, not to in any way try to impede the investigation. And I think the idea of civil penalties probably is worthwhile. Maybe not for the quote-unquote first offense, but once it's found that it's there, if there's not full cooperation, the civil penalty should kick in.
Thank you.
So thanks, Darin, and I certainly would agree with Peter. The overclassification, I don't know what the committee could do about that, but it's certainly something that should be looked at. And then I think it falls into two categories. So you've got a situation like former President Trump, President Biden, Vice President Pence that had classified documents, and what's the final analysis of that? What potential harm did it do to the country, and how does that come about? And what could we do to ensure when a high-ranking official is leaving office that it's very clear of what they cannot take? But I think the second part of this is sort of the Snowden part of it, that we've got people who willfully, intentionally steal classified documents, give them to our enemies, and in my view, the penalties cannot be strong enough. There's not enough of a deterrent. These people need to understand, if they're going to do this and put the United States of America in jeopardy, that they've got a very high price to pay. Not a slap on the wrist, not please don't do it again, not we'll look at it differently, but a real robust penalty that is a deterrent. I feel very strongly about that.
Well, first, let me apologize to this committee that I will have to leave at 11 sharp. This hearing may be over, but if I'm rude to any of you, I apologize. On this topic, the last law that of which I was principal author was the Overclassification Act of 2010 or 2011, which President Obama signed into law. And the point of it was there are steps we can take. Congress can mandate to require portion marking of documents. You all understand what that is. To educate folks who do classification about what the rules are. Classification protects sources and methods, not people from personal embarrassment, or protects their turf. I mean, we have to get that. And the executive branch has many different classification systems, so it's extremely hard for Agency A to talk to Agency B if there are classified documents involved, and that could be simplified. And this committee might take a lead on that. The last thing I would say is that the rules for declassifying by a president should be made much clearer. I can't imagine anyone ever intended that a president just thinking that things were declassified was enough of a trail to prove that they were declassified. And I think that ought to be written into regulation or legislation so that that can't happen again.
I agree with what my colleagues have said, and public trust, anything that erodes public trust in our institutions or individuals in power who have held power, we're going to have a crisis in trust in our government and trust in our institutions because of these perceived abuses of power. And whether it's willful, unintentional, what are the penalties that these individuals will be facing? There is a lot of confusion about classification of documents and when they can be declassified and who can declassify. And I agree, there's too much classification. So I don't know what this committee can do about that. But the penalties are unclear, and anything that erodes public confidence in our institution is a detriment to the fabric of our representational government. And I worry about this crisis of confidence. And all the polls indicate when they ask the people, do you think that we're on the right track, on the wrong track? What do you think about this institution and this organization? And you see it diminishing every time. And that saddens me because we've got to all do a better job of, once again, getting the public trust in our institution, or if not, this will be a great detriment to the future of our government and our democracy.
Likewise, I share the comments of my colleagues on the classification issues. I think there is a tendency often to overclassify things that aren't necessarily classified. I think we've all been in those briefings, and we come out of our head, those TSSCI briefings, sometimes scratching our heads and say, was really all of that classified? And often it's probably not. So I think looking at how things are classified is important. Holding people accountable if there's violations of the rules, that's important. Having those checks and balances. Transparency is vitally important to maintaining trust and confidence. I've often said that the vast majority of people in the intelligence community and law enforcement go to work every day doing the very best they can, deliver their oath, protect their community, protect their countries. And if there are a few bad apples that violate those rules, it hurts everyone. And so there has to be accountability. One other thing I'll mention that's kind of tangential to some of these things, especially when we've talked about the high-profile leaks that have happened, or betrayal of their oath to protect things like classified information, is the oversight process of monitoring who that have those very select special clearances. Obviously, protecting privacy and civil liberties of the American people is vitally important. That's what the Constitution and laws ensure. For those who have high-level clearances, there should be a different level of scrutiny. If you don't want the clearance, you don't want the scrutiny, then don't accept the clearance. Just don't go out, don't apply for those type of jobs. If you do have the clearance, there should be a review of the level of scrutiny that people are under. If there were, so many of these breaches would have been caught early on, and it's been one of the things, I guess, as I look back at my time in Congress, I wish we had done more to rein that in, to put more scrutiny on those who do have the clearance. Again, protecting privacy and civil liberties is vitally important, but for those who have even the highest level of clearance, it's a different level of scrutiny. If you don't want the scrutiny, then don't ask for the clearance.
Thank you.